Please join me in welcoming our outstanding speakers, Michael Barrett, President and Chief Executive Officer, Magnite; Lisa Valentino, Executive Vice President, Client Solutions and Addressable Enablement, Disney Advertising; and Molly Peck, Chief Marketing Officer, Buick and GMC. This session will be moderated and hosted by Terence Kawaja, CEO and founder, LUMA Partners. Please welcome.
Thank you. Now watch this step.
All right, how's day 2 at Possible? Woo! Awesome. So, look, I understand that some of you may not recognize me not being in leather and pleather because last time I was on a stage, I was dressed a little bit differently. But yesterday was the comedian. Today is going to be the investment banker. I run LUMA Partners. We do a lot of work, in particular, in CTV. And I am thrilled that I have like these stalwart representatives of, let's face it, it's a live LUMAscape, folks. Starts with demand, goes to tech intermediaries, and ends up at the publisher. How great is that?
Amazing.
So it's so great to be on stage with you guys here at Possible. Maybe we should kick off with just a sense to give the audience a feel about how this works. So in terms of the various steps and how these companies interrelate with one another. So let's say, Molly, you've got a brand new Sierra 1500 crew cab, like just an amazing, amazing truck that you want to promote to sports viewers or other viewers. Walk us through what you do, how you hand it off, whether it's agency, how it gets to tech, and then we'll make our way down the line.
All right. So a new Sierra, and we're launching it, let's say, and the first thing we would do is we would start with what do we know about the customer, the insights, and we would create a brief. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but when we create that brief, it's not just about the creative and the messaging, it's also about the delivery. How do we reach the audience? Who do we want to reach? And how do we reach them best? And so with that brief, then we would talk to our creative agency and also, of course, our media agency, in this case it's Kara, and together they would come back with a solution that would not only have the creative idea, but the best way to deliver that idea, and oftentimes that's done so in a creative way. And so we would also want within that, not only how do we get them, but how do we also measure our audience and the performance of the campaign.
So you're looking for the closed loop. You want to do the planning, and then you want to see how the plan worked against results.
We set the KPIs up front.
Yep.
And so that really helps inform which media delivery is best.
Do we have a missing chair here? Should there be a DSP chair there? Or you had an announcement yesterday. Maybe we don't need the chair anymore. I don't know. How do you work in this line? Yeah, exactly.
We didn't practice it.
I know. By the way, none of the questions we talked about I'm going to ask, so completely. I'm just kidding.
So, in the case of this plan now, it has to be activated, and if the media choice is streaming or connected television, then generally speaking, there's 2 ways you can purchase. You can call up Disney and go directly to Disney and do an insertion order like you have done for 50 years in broadcast. Or if you're doing it programmatically, you'll work with someone like a Magnite who will be able to either process through just the pipes, so a workflow with data added to it, or in many cases, it could be an auction where it becomes biddable inventory, and the inventory is put up for auction, and we run that auction. So with the case of Disney, a valued partner of ours, we power their programmatic pieces of it, so you'll see it in different flavors in that instance.
Lisa, it's football season, and Molly needs to move some Sierra crew cabs.
We're ready for her. I actually think it's both, though. in terms of how we service our partners now. If you think about football, right? We're in the business of real time. I think Steve Stout talked about the currency of culture yesterday. That's what football is. That's what a lot of sports and entertainment are. And so the partnership, it's changed so drastically. The ingredients haven't changed necessarily. Molly's still looking to reach, folks that want to buy the Sierra, but how you do it and the sophistication that we can bring has completely, radically shifted. And so there's a couple of things that we do now, right? We will lay in for Molly the creativity of sports, right? The integrations that you might want with Monday Night Football, how we surround the sport fan, et cetera. But with the partnership with Michael and Magnite, you don't know in a Monday Night Football game or a college basketball game how that game's gonna go, right? It's real time, and that's where the gold is. And the opportunity with automation is Molly's team is sitting there with Magnite saying, how am I taking advantage of this opportunity in real time? The game just went into overtime. There was a major upset in the third quarter. You can't predict that when you're giving an insertion order 6 months in advance. And so this relationship becomes incredibly powerful because you now, and we're doing a lot of educating together in the market in terms of how do you take advantage of real-time culture?
Yep.
Automation enables opportunities that never existed before, and that drives performance for Molly, right? Because that closed loop attribution comes from laying in your foundation, right, with an ESPN or a property like that, and using data and technology to accelerate that opportunity as well. It's really not an either or, it's an and.
It just strikes me, this conversation is so different from, I remember a similar conversation at, I believe it was like IAB 2009, when the narrative was this programmatic stuff, the data and the bidding is turning inventory into pork bellies. You remember that whole narrative? And it was almost like they were fighting it and wanted to do it the old school way of direct sales. They saw it as a threat. But Molly, you're talking about data integrations in and around the planning of audience. You're talking about sophisticated tools, and you've got the technology to be able to deliver. We are in a different world today, clearly.
We are, and we're talking about identity, right? Like, I know we're gonna talk about maybe measurement or currency, but the new opportunity with companies like Disney, Magnite, and Buick, and GM is to center around identity because we can.
Right.
Our backbones sit on really sophisticated audience graphs. So while, yes, we might need...
Clarify, Disney's audience graph,
Disney's audience graph, first-party audience graphs that allow us to say, while you may have wanted to reach adults 25 to 54 in 2009 at the IAB Summit, today we're talking about auto intenders that have this psychographic and this type of profile. We can do that across linear and streaming at scale.
And with that, we can turn advertising from being something that's intrusive, something that I may or may not be interested in, to something that's actually informative and maybe even welcome. And if we can do that through the right audience, at the right time, with the right message, then we're being welcomed into people's homes or on their screens, wherever they're viewing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to primarily focus on streaming because that's what's in the title. However, before we go there, this notion of, we've for a long time have talked about a different definition of the phrase CTV, where the C stands for convergent. 5 years ago, I was at some conference and I said, guys, calm down. Linear is going to be bigger than streaming 10 years from now. That was 5 years ago. Obviously, it's double the size today, and I'm gonna stand by that. I'm gonna double down on that. 5 years from now, linear, and we all know the direction. Linear declining, streaming going up, and we're gonna talk about streaming. But in the meantime, for the next 5, 7, 10, maybe longer, Molly is going to need to holistically manage campaigns between and among linear, addressable, AVOD, maybe fast, and even digital in some of these formats that are now being considered quote unquote TV. So I want to sort of get each of you your sense for where we are in that journey, that transition, and how Molly can manage holistically. Lisa, you have properties, you have ABC, you have Hulu, you have Disney Plus, you got properties across that spectrum. And Molly, your audience is watching on cable, they're watching on satellite, they're watching on broadcast, they're watching on streaming. How do you do it?
Well, I would say how do we do it? We really follow the audience. So where the audience is, where they want to watch, how they want to watch, that's completely up to them. I don't think we're leading the audience, they're leading us.
Yeah.
And so as far as linear, we still are big consumers of live sports. It's a great way to reach our target, especially with GMC. With Buick, which is the other brand that I lead marketing for, it's much different. But with sports and our target audience, they marry together quite nicely. And we can see a cause effect when we run an ad in a game, 99% of which people watch real time. We dual screen it because 80% of people are actually looking at their mobile device while they're watching a game. They're conversing, they're checking scores of other games, they're maybe in betting, whatever, and we can dual screen our advertising and reach them that way, so we get a nice frequency bump. But from a streaming standpoint, we are all in, 100% addressable streaming. It's because again, we're able to get to the right audience at the right time with the right message, and it's much more measurable. So as we evolve here as marketers and are able to deliver that kind of measurement and that integrity of data, it's just a win-win for us.
But there is audience overlap, right? You've had the same people watching GMC ads on linear and on streaming.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, okay.
Yes and no. It's interesting, when we look at Hulu is an amazing study for us. By the way, collectively for us. You might not know, it's a 15-year-old brand, okay? So we have, it's so interesting, I always talk about this in the form of children. We have a 15-year-old in Hulu, and we have a 6-month-old in Disney Plus, right? And it's super interesting when we look at, let's take an example, Abbott Elementary, right? Any show on ABC, you look at a 35-day on Nielsen, right? You take Nielsen and you look at the 35-day viewing habits of a show. Hulu contributes more ratings to that show than ABC, okay? And so now there's not a lot of duplication in that.
Interesting.
Because you're not watching that show twice.
Right.
You're choosing what platform, at what time do I want to watch that program. So it ties so well. So it's how you cume reach. That's what we're spending a lot of time with folks like Molly, educating based on the data we see. Here's how you start to reset your base. By the way, the audience on Hulu is a lot younger than the audience on ABC. So if you start to stack this the right way, you actually cume reach and frequency very efficiently. And if you do it through programmatic or through a partnership like Magnite, you can really be efficient with deduplicated reach across linear and streaming, which ultimately is what you're looking for, Molly. So it does offer uniqueness, in terms of the audience.
They can choose their delivery.
But we've got to get better at the user experience, because the first thing you hear from everyone is, they say, what do you do for a living? Oh, we programmatic advertising, those ads, and they're like, oh, I hate that. I see the same ad all the time. Or an ad doesn't load, and it just says programming stalled. And so a lot of that's just inherent to, A, we're in our infancy, but B, content like Disney's is distributed widely, and content that appears on Hulu sometimes may not be owned by Hulu, but ergo, the intelligence doesn't exist in the ecosystem to say, no, that person's seen that ad 3 times. And so I think to your point about linear being bigger than streaming 5 years from now, I respectfully disagree. That said, it will be if we don't figure these things out.
Right.
Because if we can't turn to you and give you a simple, basic reach and frequency analysis.
It already is. On the entertainment side, we have more streaming supply than linear.
Right.
So we've tipped.
Really, you've tipped.
We've tipped.
Interesting.
On the sports side, it's still a big screen moment. It's still a big linear dominated moment. And that's going to change and that's going to evolve over time. But what we were talking about backstage is it's super complicated to run live. I mean, we have more live content than anyone out there. And our friends at Netflix this week, you saw what, you see what can happen when you don't have a stack that is built for live. So it's something that I think that's the next big accelerant is how do you think about the technology and the data pieces that fuel live?
And with this focus on real time, it feels like the ad server is all of a sudden this boring sort of business that everyone sort of shunted away years ago. Ad serving. Feels like it's pretty strategic today, right? I mean, you bought SpringServe now 2-3 years ago.
Right.
And there's just not that many ad servers out there once you get past Google and Freewheel.
Yeah, especially in the premium video area, right? And I think ad serving becomes terribly important for helping solve some of these problems we've been talking about because you have perfect knowledge of direct sold, programmatic campaigns, how to manage the reach and frequency there. But most importantly, you see this evolution now with audience data being compiled on the publisher side and the value of that and the importance of keeping that safe, privacy compliant, and the ad server is really becoming the place where you can store that data and easily do matching through programmatic.
You also have to be able, though, to manipulate. The business is changing so quickly, right? I mean, we're talking in 4 to 6 month increments. What you need your ad server to do changes.
Right.
We have our own ad server. We went in-house, and we've made some changes in this year, in this environment, and we've made changes to the algorithm to allow us to maximize yield. We compete in multiple marketplaces, right? Biddable marketplaces, multiple programmatic marketplaces, and direct. And the tech has to be able to inform your strategy and vice versa. And if you're reliant on a third-party tech stack, it's going to be a slow process.
Right. So agility is a key skill set in this evolving marketplace. Just one last question on this notion of the switch from linear to streaming, and that is there's been a lot of dialogue about live, and if you look at linear is dominated by live, and live is dominated by sports, and sports is dominated by the NFL. So in many ways, what I've said is the NFL or the Sunday Ticket is like the duct tape of linear TV. It feels like when that goes, that would be the sort of tipping point. Molly, sports has got to be paramount for selling GMC Sierra crew cab.
100%. There really is, I mean, what we know about our audience, the insights, the media property, it's the best. And we do buy a lot of NFL. We buy other sports too. NCAA we buy, soccer we buy. So we have a full year 360 to reach our target audience, but we complement it with an addressable and streaming strategy as well. And then, like I would say with Buick, because the audience is so well defined and they don't lean into live sports in the same way that our GMC buyer does, we do, I would say we're probably amongst the leaders in the industry with streaming and addressable with the Buick brand.
Lisa, when I hear you talk about your business, you're almost like fashioning them as solutions for Molly, as opposed to what we used to hear publishers talk about, which is my content, ratings, my content. you're actually evolved beyond that into, no, let's sell more Sierras. And providing the kind of sophisticated audience solutions and technology to deliver that. That must have an impact on how you sell. So next month are the upfronts.
No.
May
Are
16th.
they? Wait.
How is
Someone
this?
told me that.
Yeah, I know. Write that down. So this has got to change your strategy. Like, how do you think about upfronts versus, say, the upfront 5 years ago? And what's the implication on your sort of scatter market after that?
It definitely has evolved our thinking. I would say the upfronts are a very important part of the ecosystem, and they are a very robust part of the ecosystem. But there's flexibility and fluidity built into those deals now, because any smart publisher, anyone that has the type of stack that we do, where I said 51% of our supply is streaming, you need to be able to have brands come in and out and activate against that in real time.
Yep.
You need to have the pipes and the partnerships that enable that. So while we will lay down a foundation with our brands and our agencies, there's a level of flexibility we want to offer the marketplace, because we want Molly's team to be leaned in on how are we doing data matching to ensure that our first-party data and Molly's data sets are in a privacy-compliant environment where we can match and buy against in real time. We want to make sure that we have opportunity for the marketplace to compete 365 days a year in those type of environments, but still solve for the integration business, the creative business that we're all in. It's why when you look at, I call it the new Disney, I love pressure testing and asking people to play back our playbook to us, because you can very easily tell those that, oh, I know Disney, I've done business with, yeah, they got Monday Night Football. No. This is a company that is anchored in data and technology, and that fuels, we just made an announcement this morning with Kroger. First retail media partnership, and that'll be the first of many, but that's a data deal.
Yes.
Okay, that's about, and Pepsi is a part of that, but that's Kroger's data and Disney's data being commingled in a privacy compliant way and providing ROAS in real time for Pepsi, right? Like, that's how, and by the way, when you do that inside of content that people love and care about, that also contributes to the results. So yeah, does that change how we bring our assets to the table? I would say we're always evolving how we package, and we also take a lot of that feedback from
I think our
market.
Conversation has changed.
Right.
We don't talk about day parts and programs anymore, although of course programs are still super important, but we talk more about data.
Yeah.
And it's become a lot more technical, a lot more measured. And so the extent to which Lisa can say, I have your audience, and I can get you your audience, and I can deliver it and prove it to you, that's amazing. And then we're buying.
Yeah.
It sounds like everyone's rowing in the same direction. Lisa, you want Molly to have great ROI, and Michael, you want Lisa to have terrific yield. It's like, and ultimately there are so many moving parts that the optimization of it, whether it's direct or programmatic, that mix, feels like there's got to be a lot of coordination in order to get it right, so that everyone sort of optimizes in the equation.
Yeah, there's just no question that when you get to premium video, given the scarcity, given the value, that the role that we play is quite different. And I think that that's, an evolution and a positive evolution for ad tech, particularly on the supply side platforms. We were known as a guy that was able to bring in pennies for your remnant inventory,
right.
And then
Originally.
it grew, exactly. But we were just the revenue guy. So my relationship with Lisa would have been just, hey, you need money? I can find you DSPs and give you money.
Very transactional.
Yes, the last thing Lisa needs is for me to do that for her. She's pretty good at that. And so our job then is to sit back and allow that dialogue to occur, to understand the needs, and then just to help execute for our partners on both sides of the marketplace.
Sounds like there's a lot of integration between these three. Let me ask you, you made an announcement yesterday. You announced, so Magnite announced that they were launching a teeth straightening company called Clearline. Sorry, not teeth straightening. It was, what was it? It was an announcement where you were going to enable capabilities to go direct to advertisers.
Yeah, no, so it's just kind of an extension of what I just talked about. And that is, in many cases, there's deep relationships on the premium video side. And in many cases, the pricing is negotiated between buyer and seller, not a auction marketplace, which is called an upfront. And there's, in many cases, there's data involved and on both sides. And our role in that instance is to try to get as much working media to the publisher for the advertiser to have the best ROI. And sometimes that entails not using all the pieces of the traditional ad tech ecosystem. So what we did, what we've been asked to do by our publishers and our agency and marketer clients, is to create an interface that they can easily transact on those kind of corner cabinet scenarios where it's a defined audience, publisher generally defined audience, agreed upon pricing, not an auction, and just make it seamless and as low cost and as low friction as possible.
It almost sounds like, I mean, if you look at a LUMAscape or just look at the ecosystem, it's very fragmented, right? There's a lot of complexity, a lot of moving parts. And doesn't this just sort of feel like the natural evolution of this industry, which should be fewer players doing higher volumes, less handoffs, less touch points, and where Molly gets better ROI, Lisa gets better yield, and there are probably fewer players, which means some rationalization and consolidation. I know there's the term SPO, supply path optimization, but truly, it does need to sort of consolidate. I mean, it is crazy fragmented, and in a privacy concerned world, the fewer hops, the greater the data husbandry, and that ought to be something on everyone's remit to make it a more simpler industry, because boy, we love complexity in this sector.
Well, yeah, I
It's
think
done well for your business.
Yeah, well.
his chart. I think the direct connection is really important, and our philosophy is we want to be directly connected to as many opportunities as possible.
Yep.
Where there's an opportunity to make that connection, and by the way, we see it. The inventory gets smaller and smaller the more times you have to hop. Those match rates go down, the supply goes down, and so we see the benefit of it, actually. So we're excited about what you guys are doing there.
Awesome. Let me ask you a question. Molly, you're a big top, 10 advertiser. You're a huge advertiser, GM. But one of the attributes when we bring the sort of tools that we've gotten used to in digital in terms of precision audiences to the big screen, the television, sight, sound, and motion, is this opportunity to go longer tail, to go to performance advertisers, smaller advertisers. It requires a different set of interfaces because those people act differently. But here is all of these direct-to-consumer brands and performance brands that heretofore could never have afforded TV, and all of a sudden, now that they can parse, niche audiences, and it turns out that right when they're being kneecapped by Apple ATT, thank you very much, Tim Cook, that their go-to digital channels are no longer helping them. How can you guys fashion solutions? I know you've probably sold most of your inventory to the big ones, but is that like a juicy opportunity for Disney? I gotta imagine.
It's huge. Well, look, it's huge. We've always been in that business. Hulu was built by the D2C brands. Right. But, I'll give you an example. We launched a self-serve platform 2 years ago. You think of, Disney has a huge footprint in local television, local digital. And 2 weeks ago, this is like a real case. Your heads will pop off your bodies. $38,000 local IO. automotive. It wasn't GM, but it was an automotive, zip code targeted. It would have taken 38 IOs to execute the $38,000 deal because of all the zip codes. 3,800 emails probably on all the creative, right? Submitting creative, getting it checked. We have a self-serve platform where buyers can go in with their credit card if they have payment on. It was done in 30 minutes. It was executed in 30 minutes. Like that's, and we're migrating our local business. That is the benefit.
Yeah.
It's not just a price thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a business shift,
Right.
which is just exciting.
Yeah, and we
So,
buy a massive amount
You're
of local
massive.
television.
Right, sure.
Our dealers buy local television. We want ultra-targeted, you know, EV buyers are super concentrated. If we want to reach them, we want to buy local. So, yeah, we welcome that too.
Well, a fundamentally different conversation than years ago. The level of sophistication, the level of coordination, the level of integration amongst all these LUMAscape players, and what I think is an inevitable sort of consolidation and rationalization to make it easier and make it more effective. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have just sold a whole bunch of Sierra 1500 crew cabs right here today. Thank you very much.